Welcome, brothers and sisters in Christ. Thank you for joining the Living Pro-Life Conference, a formational opportunity so that you can be better informed and formed as witnesses to the pro-life movement. My name is Father Leo Patalinghug, host and founder of platinggrace.com, an international food and faith movement, as well as the host of the TV show Savoring Our Faith on EWTN. And I'm grateful to collaborate with the CatholicSpeakers.com, the largest Catholic speakers network for events around the world. And tonight we're blessed to have Dr. Ray Guarendi. I'll give his bio in just a moment. But for all of you who are joining us, I'd like to invite you, if you already haven't, to please participate in everything that we've got to offer by purchasing the VIP package. We've done everything we could to prepare you with all the resources that you need to fight for life and to equip you with over 50 pro-life presenters and keeping the cost as low as possible. So for $30, you'll have access to over 20 plus hours of effective pro-life content that will not only evangelize you, but make you more effective of a witness, addressing every issue that you can think of regarding the pro-life issues. We want you to take this opportunity to not only unify in a time when we really are fighting for the pro-life causes at all stages of life, but to prepare you with formation from leading experts from around the world. So please visit livingprolife.com for more information and to register to access all of that content. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Ray Guarendi to our conversation. He is an incredible speaker for the gift of life, and he is an author, TV host, radio host, podcaster, and also an amazing doctor who can bring about the practical truths of our Catholic faith to a very practical and practicable level to you and your family. And so I know that there is a lot more to learn, but Dr. Ray Guarendi, thank you for joining us for this livingprolife.com conference.
Father Leo, two things. One, you read that exactly as I wrote it. You didn't make any of the changes. That's very nice. The other thing, I didn't think you were actually going to invite me to be with you after my stinging defeat of you on the TV show. You should have changed your apostolate from Plating Grace to second place. I think that's what happened. My spam,
I knew that this was going to happen.
My spam creation, I saw the tears in your eyes.
They were truly tears coming out of my eyes when you combined spam with peanut butter and ate it raw. But that is besides the point. What we are here to do is provide formation, and I know we're going to have fun with this as well. So for all of those joining us, I want to thank you for your participation. But we know that we've got a lot of questions regarding pro-life, and you are certainly someone who can help answer it because you're not only living it, you're putting it in practice with the amount of children that you've welcomed in the world. Tell us a little bit about your very unique family because it's a message for all pro-lifers to hear.
I have 10 adopted children, 3 white, 2 Hispanic, 2 biracial, 3 black. My wife would take the kids through the store and I'd go. If I was heavily sedated, I would go with them. And I could see people's eyes thinking, is this some kind of club or something? You know, does that guy know those aren't all his kids? So I told him, I said, I suspect her, but I can't catch her, 10 adopted kids. Father Leo, it kind of happened like eating potato chips. You always think you can eat one more until you throw up. That's kind of what happened. So we went all the way up to 10.
But doctor, we have to admit that that is not normal. Or should it be normal? I want to talk about this whole idea of the mentality of adoption over abortion, because we know that there are tons of people seeking adoptions, but children are constantly being aborted. And so there is a real strange kind of discrepancy in the desires versus the actions. So I'd like for you to tell me, how did you adopt an adoption mentality?
Oh, that's simple, Father. I needed the tax deductions. If you adopt in December, you still get the tax deduction for the whole year. And the agencies don't tell you that, but I figured it out about the third kid. Actually, truth is, God picks up the pieces of life. I came home from Cleveland Clinic, and my wife and I had a good cry because I was told, you will never conceive. You have a congenital problem. I said, well, maybe we can adopt one child, perhaps two. I was 34, so I didn't have a whole lot more fatherhood years coming up. Well, there's a secret, and I say this to all our listeners, Father Leo. This was true then, and it is still somewhat true now. If you don't care about the race of the child, adoption can occur much sooner. My wife and I just thought, hey, with each kid, what's one more? The percentage sized growth of the family just gets smaller. You go from 2 to 3, it's 50% growth. You go from 9 to 10, it's 11% growth. We just kept adopting because you figure, hey, what the heck? Hey, I'm a shrink. So if my kids make the papers for bad behavior, I at least got some good ones.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And as a shrink, you would know that sanity is one of the reasons why people will adopt and be accepted as adopting parents. So I want you to maybe address, how do you keep sane with all of those children? Because what's very interesting is that the larger the family, and this is something that I've observed and something that you could probably even do a sociological study, the happier the family is in the long run. And those who have like smaller families because they've made it a point to only have a limited number of children, I'm not saying that they're not happy, but there is a qualitative difference in the level of joy because joy is multiplied. Could you maybe address the mentality and how to stay sane if you want to have a family, and in your case, and in many Catholic cases, a large family?
You got to get over psychological correctness. You got to get over the idea that if you don't do this right, you're going to have all kinds of psychological and emotional problems, and they're going to pop up 22 years from now when your kid's sitting in the middle of some afternoon TV talk show talking about you and his 12 years of therapy because you messed him up. You cannot go into parenthood frightened. You have to go in with the confidence to say, I am the parent. I pray for God's guidance and grace, but it may not turn out exactly as I want it to turn out, but that's okay because St. James said, this is faith. This is faith that is pure and undefiled before the Lord, that we take care of the widows and the orphans in their distress. So people will say to me, Father Leo, well, I don't know if I'm called to adopt. And I will say to them, God wrote it down. He doesn't have to necessarily call you individually. It's in his book. Whoever welcomes a child like this welcomes me, said Jesus.
Now, you mentioned something that a previous presenter talked about. If you did not care about the race of the child, your adoption can come more quickly, more efficiently, and maybe even more smoothly. So I want you to talk about that because I would like to just see, our Catholic Church has always not cared about the color of someone's skin in the same way we did not care if that child is going to have all of his or her limbs, a hair lip, or even other issues that would make that child less than quote unquote normal. Can you address how we can help couples to get over their fear about not having a normal child? Because we know doctors are so quick to just suggest that this child won't be perfect or perfectly normal, and they'll even start suggesting abortion because of that. What is your take on that as a professional?
We Christians are called to embrace kids with special needs, without special needs, with dark skin, with yellow skin. It doesn't matter. We are called for that. Yes, some of my children have bad histories, Father. They've been drug exposed in the womb. They've been alcohol exposed. They were neglected. They were abused. Some we got at infancy, some we got later. And yes, it was a bouncy ride those early years because those kids had to be embraced in a Catholic home. We were called, as my wife has said, my kids are all grown now. And by the way, if you let me brag, I know the guys are listening and they'll appreciate me bragging. My son's
I would
parole
not be
officer
able to
said,
stop you anyway. I wouldn't be able to stop you anyway.
cute. My son's parole officer said one of the nicest kids he has. So, when you hear something like that, you feel good inside. We were
Absolutely. So
told,
let me ask you this. How
okay,
do you
go ahead.
love someone? How do you love someone who is different from you? And I know that sounds so silly, but this is a basic for the Christian identity. How do you do it? And how do you get into people's minds to kind of change it, to give them a new normal, to give them a reset in how they view people and therefore how to love people? What would you say?
Father, that's the biggest worry. Am I going to love this child as I could if it were biologically mine, if this child were biologically mine? Am I going to be able to relate to this child? This child genetically is not mine. So maybe his personality, her personality could be quite different than my own. Children win you over in time. It's like a first-time parent who says, I never was all that excited about little babies. My friends had little babies, but they didn't do anything for me. And then they had their own little baby, and Facebook lookout. Every 12 minutes, this kid is put up on Facebook because the kids crawl under your heart and they win you over. Yeah, but my mother would never accept this. She would have a problem with this. And I tell them, let the child win your mother over. It is very hard to not love a child with time. Very hard.
Okay. So this is great. So from a formational point of view, for all of those people listening, there's something about giving yourself over to time, which is not easy for us, especially Americanized Western mentality who want everything in a microwavable minute. Your love for this child grows over time. Secondly, you have to allow this child, and he says, to crawl under your heart and to win you over. Sure, there are going to be things that your biological children are going to do that are going to annoy the heaven out of you. And in the same way, you have got to get over that and see the beauty of that child's dignity, no matter whose parents that child come from, so it could be from yourself or it could be from someone else. Now, what I'd like to ask you, doctor, is in raising raising a family with that many children, how do you pay for stuff like that? I mean, granted, I
Well,
know that you are a most successful doctor, author with best-selling books, and you're incredibly popular on the circuit as a speaker. And I mean,
you're
you
getting
look
carried away.
marvelous. So why wouldn't
You're
people
getting,
want to, to give you the big bucks? But I mean, we all know you're a Catholic missionary too. So we're all working off Catholic missionary scales to some degree. How do you pay for everything of 10 children when sometimes one could literally drain the resources of one family? What would you say to that mentality on finances and family?
I saw a survey that said from 0 to 18, the average child takes between $200,000 and $250,000 to raise. Well, that depends upon how you're going to indulge this child. For example, Father, when we had 10 kids under 12, we had 3 bikes. You shared the bikes. They all breathe the same air. And when my wife put pasta on the table, it was 4 pounds of pasta. And that's the way it was. Okay. So as a result, we didn't have a whole lot. At one point, you could have put all the kids' toys in one toy box. One toy box, all the kids' toys. So if you don't live the somewhat child lavish American lifestyle, it's not that expensive. You can do this. We used to find restaurants where kids under 12 ate for free. We knew where they all were. They hated us. We walked in with 10 kids under 12 and a couple of, believe it or not, I'm not making this up. One of the restaurants told us we stopped doing that because of you guys. So you can, if you want to raise a child according to the American lifestyle, you get a new bike every 2 years. When Christmas time comes around, you have 27 stuffed animals. If that's what you're going to do, it is going to cost. We had a rule: 1 stuffed animal. If you got a second stuffed animal, you choose which one you want. The other one we give to Children's Hospital. That was our rule. We had one big 15-passenger used vehicle that we call tank, and that's what we hauled them around in. And Father, the interesting thing about that, when kids grow up with less in American culture, they're spiritually more mature.
Okay, that is an excellent point. I think that when we confront the reality of children, and this is not about adoption anymore, this is about welcoming life into the world. A lot of people will choose an abortion because they think that they will not be able to provide. That, my brothers and sisters, is the lie of the devil. God has always been known as the providential father, the one who provides. And it just requires you to be willing to work with God so that God can work through you to provide. One really important thing about this is that I know a lot of holy, wonderful people that grew up in very poor situations, but they all say, I didn't know I was poor growing up because my
That's
parents
right.
always provided the love. But here's where I got to ask you, doctor, how do you discipline that many kids? I mean, were your kids just so perfectly disciplined in an almost a militaristic fashion, or were they actually kids? And how do you deal with teaching faith to children? Because I know a lot of people fear that. They don't want to screw up their kids, so they'd rather not have it with a contraceptive mentality or not have it by aborting their child. They're afraid that they're going to screw up. How did you not screw up? I know, granted, I know you're perfect and everything,
Oh,
but
wait a
how
minute. No,
did
wait a
you?
minute, Father. No, no, no. I got some children going to serve the church, and I got some probably going to serve time. So you can't just say they all turned out great.
Okay, so tell me about that.
All
Like,
right.
how do you deal with that emotionally with just
Sure.
not having a perfect family, the Instagrammable
Yeah.
family?
Because we are asked to welcome these children by Christ. He didn't say you have to welcome these children and be really, really good at it. He didn't say you have to welcome these children and when they're 23, they're all going to stay in the faith. He didn't say that. He said, open your arms to these kids. You asked the question, Father, about discipline. When my wife would get in conversations with ladies at church and somebody would find out she had 10 kids, 11 counting me, they would say something like, I can't handle the two I have. I don't even know how you do this. I can't even imagine 5 less 10. The key for my wife, the strongest willed of my 10 children was not stronger willed than their mother. She knew she had to have discipline, authority, unquestioned, so she could be loving. You don't have discipline authority, it's real hard to be loving. Father, you hear that in the confessional. Bless me, Father. Is it a grievous sin to want to shoot your kid with a bazooka? Would that be a mortal sin? I mean, I just over their head, maybe, okay? Just over their head. If you don't have authority as a parent, you get scared of having more than 2 kids.
Well, I've already absolved you of that sin. I'm kidding. I would
Good.
never even think about talking about anyone's confession. So, for all of those listening, that was a joke. I'm not as good as Dr. Ray with telling those jokes, but that was simply a joke. But you mentioned something, the word authority and the authorship of God, which is very much connected. Can you speak to us as a doctor? Have you ever worked with anyone who has challenged the authority of God and now deals with guilt, with pain, because maybe they have struggled with either a contraceptive mentality or maybe even had an abortion and have dealt with kind of the guilt, knowing that they have, again, were not obedient to the authorship, the authority of God. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your professional life without obviously any breaking of the professional seal that you have, not just as a professional, but also as a Christian man? Can you tell me a little bit about the guilt that some people have because they've bought into the lies of the culture of death?
Are you asking me if I have dealt professionally in therapy with folks like that? And I would say very seldom, maybe 50,000 times, somewhere in there, maybe 50,000 times. The further that we get from the way God says to do it, the more struggles we have with guilt, with emotional distress, with making our lives turned upside down. Now, when people come into my office, they may not realize that is at the root of their distress.
Hmm.
They know they're miserable, but they're not sure why. What is it that I'm not settled, that I'm not at peace? Something is destroying my contentment, and they don't know what it is. And if you talk with them, you'll find that long ago, They abandoned God, his authority, and his way of living. They abandoned it. They got rid of it. And I'll ask them about that. I'll say, when did this happen? How did this happen? What do you think now? And they're starting to realize that if I don't do it his way and I do it my way, I'm asking for a downward spiral. I see that all the time, Father.
So how do you help someone to reconcile their pain? Because I can only say this as a priest, and again, I'm not breaking any confidential seal as well, speaking in very general terms, but you and I work very similarly in the healing aspect of a person's soul. What would you as a professional doctor do if someone is listening right now and they're struggling because they are dealing with this guilt and this shame? How would you help them to reconcile to God and experience again the life-giving love of our Father in heaven? What would you say to them?
If the guilt and the shame is something they won't let go of, then what they are basically doing is telling God, I don't trust you. You said you'd forgive me pretty much no matter what I've done, but I don't believe that. I don't forgive me, therefore you can't forgive me. That's what their thinking is. And I might say to them, now you look behind me, looks like a green wall on your screen. And I might say to them, you see that wall? That wall's blue. And they'll look at me and say, well, no, it's green. I go, no. I'm telling you, it's blue. Dr. Ray, it's green. I'll say, okay. So if I tell you that wall is blue, my thinking, my perception is wrong. Is it not? Yes. That's what you're doing to yourself. Your thinking is wrong and you believe it. You believe you're unforgivable. You think that, but that's like saying that wall is blue. That's how off your thinking is.
Now, that's absolutely fantastic, because part of the purpose of the livingprolife.com conference is to provide formation, because a well-formed conscience can make a good decision. It won't be easy and it won't always be done perfectly, but a formed conscience is better than a deformed conscience. What I'd like to do is ask you, can you maybe trace some of the ways our moral compass and our collective consciousness has been deformed? Because now more than ever, people just don't even know that life begins in the womb. I mean, even doctors are saying that it's not a baby, it's just a fetus. And I like to correct them and tell them that fetus in Latin means small person. What happened in our world from a medical and professional point of view that just screwed up our conscience to the point where we are now truly deformed?
I had a fella say to me one time, well, whether it's a baby or not, it's legal. So we can do it. That's part of it. The culture says it's okay. The culture has to justify itself. You know, in history, the terrible evil done by rulers has been justified. Nobody has ever said, this is evil, but that's good because I'm going to do it because I want to do evil. Very few people say that. It shows you the power of God's law in our heart. We have to justify that. Well, that's not a person. It's legal. Well, it will ruin my life. You don't understand. I can't care for it. It's unfair to bring a child into this world without a father or a mother together. So all the justifications are there, and the culture says, and people listen to the culture, they truly do. Nowadays, you have to have unbelievable spiritual strength to stand against that culture that doesn't think like you as a Christian. The culture says it's not only okay, it's good. And it makes it look so good. See, that's the thing. Evil in its unadulterated form, nobody's attracted to it. But you got to make it look good. And the culture is exceptionally skilled at making it look good. We're caring for the mom. That's why adoption is such an alternative. Christians get attacked, Father Leo. Christians are told, well, if you're so pro-life, why don't you adopt some of these children? Which is a piece of nonsense, because there are far more couples waiting to adopt than there are children available. If you go older and you foster first with the chance to adopt, I call it lease with option to buy, rent to own, you have many more opportunities. Parents will come to me and they'll say, I want to adopt, but I can't adopt a baby. I have 3 children. I'm 41 years old. Nobody's going to pick me as an adopted parent. I said, all right, you willing to foster? Maybe you'll get a 4-year-old. And maybe in a year and a half, when that 4-year-old is still with you, you have a chance to adopt that 4-year-old. You want to do it that way? Because you could do it that way. A lot of people go overseas because they don't want a child of another race because they're afraid of the whole culture aspect. I remember I was asked that, Father Leo, when we adopted our first Black child. How are you going to keep his culture alive? I said, what culture is that? He's living in my home with parents who love him. We go to church together. I have white friends, Black friends, red friends. What culture are you talking about? Our culture is now our faith-filled culture. I have a son, Peter. He's 23. He's Black. He is more like me than any of the other children in his personality. We have an enormously close relationship. He says to me, Dad, really kind of silly that a culture looks at pigment in a skin as making a difference between people's relations with each other. I go, yeah, Petey, you're right.
Now, you've touched on a few things in that incredibly profound response to a complex question, but I want to actually get a little bit more complicated because you mentioned how culture is something that can deform our consciences, especially since culture is influenced by the world, whether it be through entertainment, whether through politics, whether through sin. And, at the time of this interview, we are experiencing a transition in government, namely a new president. And we are facing a presidential leader who is claiming Catholicism, and I'm never going to take that away from him, but the actions of supporting life are not consistent with his voting policies, especially in his unabashed support of abortion, even up until birth. And so this is really a struggle for a lot of people who might be watching because they're watching because they want to be strengthened. I want you to speak to them and how to deal with the depression and the discouragement, because the pro-life movement has always fought an uphill battle the same way Jesus carried his cross up the hill of Calvary. But can you give some professional advice to give encouragement to people who may be feeling depressed and discouraged because their leader and their culture just keeps, quote unquote, crapping on the pro-life movement? I hope I don't get kicked out for saying crapping, but I could have used another word like shiitake-ing on them. So how would you help them to stay focused, to stay strong? What would you say?
I'm getting more of those questions now in therapy. The people are discouraged by what they see as the moral free fall, the downward, like a drain, picking up pace spiral into the gutter. Several things. Most of human history, Christians have always been a minority. In our Lord's Day, with the apostles heading out, there was a handful of them heading out into a pagan world. So they've always been a minority. Yeah, in our culture, we've had some time where we appeared to be the majority, but that was, I think, kind of an aberration in human history. So one, as a Christian, recognize your countercultural. The Lord said, they persecute me, they're going to persecute you. Rejoice and be glad when they utter all kinds of slander against you for my name's sake. So recognize that. You do not need the culture to agree with you to have faith and walk with the Lord. Father, a little personal note here. As things have gotten more chaotic rapidly in our society, I had to do a little regrouping. Oh yeah, I was a Catholic Christian, and I was pretty comfortable in that state. But I realized something, Father. I had one foot in the world and one foot in my faith. Things were going pretty good for me, I liked it a lot. And then I realized, no, this truly is not my home, and it's becoming very obvious to me. So the Lord tells me, Ray, I want you to live as a faithful disciple in the way you conduct your life as best you can. I'll help you. but I recognize I don't need all the people around me to believe like me in order to have peace. If that's the case, I'm in big trouble because I can't control them. And I can't control a culture that says we don't really need God all that much anymore. Give him the boot, put him on the shelf because he stands in the way of what we want to do. So Christians now are going to be in a smaller minority, and they're going to be, if you're a faithful Christian, in a much smaller minority. And that is our reality. Know it, and you can have some peace with it.
This is absolutely fantastic. And I can't thank you enough, Dr. Ray, for coming on this livingprolife.com conference. I want to just give you kind of a few minutes to maybe share with people, speaking from your heart, what you think they need to be doing to be better formed, better witnesses in this pro-life effort throughout the stages of life, from conception to death. How can we be better at proclaiming the message of Christ, who came to give us life and life to the fullest? And then let people know where they can learn more about you, your ministry, and even the services that you provide.
There was a survey done, Father. This was a while back, probably 25 years ago. They said that if mom and dad took a child to church regularly, there's 70 to 80% chance that child as an adult would go to church. Now, that's probably not true now. It's probably more like around 50%, but then it was 70. Then they said if mom only took the child to church, about 50% of the kids stayed in church as adults. If nobody took the child to church, it was 20%. But here's the twist. If dad only took the kids to church, the percentage of kids who remained in the church was as high as if both parents took the kids to church. Now, I don't know what that says, but it seems to me God is telling us, hey, you men listening to this, you're asked to be spiritual leaders. You know, I used to pray under the covers. When kids were growing up, I go to bed, I'd get under the covers and I'd say my prayers. Nobody knew I was saying my prayers. I was under the covers. What if I would have just knelt by the bed? So when my kids came in to say goodnight or walk by the hall, they'd see their dad on his knees on a bed. What about that? So my advice is live that faith in view of the kids, especially if you're a male, because our culture, if you look at all the statistics, the religious people are women. The more spiritually oriented are women. So guys, if you're listening, you take the lead on this. Pray the rosary like I used to do. One thing nice about having 10 kids, because it was easy. When we went around, we just had one decade of the rosary. That's why we did it. You know, and I used to levitate while I said it, you know, as I prayed the rosary in Aramaic above broken glass. That was pretty impressive. I mean, the kids were impressed. I couldn't stay
Your
up all that
Holiness,
long, you know. Well, yeah.
Your Holiness is just overwhelming. I've got to bring this to a close because it's just like drinking from a fire hydrant, the holiness and the wisdom coming through the screen right now. But I do want to reiterate something, that the majority of people who are watching this conference are probably going to be women. Ladies, I'd like for you to make your men step up and make them watch this particular interview and this particular conference, because the pro-life movement is not a war on women. It's a war on women and men. And it is a war on what happens naturally between man and woman. And men, you need to become the protector, the head of the household, and the lover of your spouse, and feed them with your faith, as well as feed your children with that faith. So this is absolutely imperative for the formation of future pro-life witnesses. Dr. Ray, where can people learn more about you? Drop a website, drop your phone number, drop your credit card, and the last 4 digits of your social security number.
My website is drray.com, DRRAY.com. All 15 of the books are there. The one book is called, my most recent one is Raising Upright Kids in an Upside Down Culture. And Father Leo, it deals directly with what the culture is trying to do to misshape our kids' souls. Very powerful book to give you the strength to stand against that culture, no longer on your side. And I have a Facebook page too. So if you want to check in, I put stuff up there every so often. And my most popular post, by the way, was me culinarily crushing you in my TV show. It was ugly. There was blood all over the place. That wasn't mine.
I will definitely be at the bedside kneeling today just because I want to pray for you. Because remember that whole my wall behind me is blue? Well, actually, I think you think that wall is rainbow. All right. You might have
I'm all
you
over the
might have
map.
used the wrong mushrooms that you put in that spam banana peanut butter concoction.
You
What I'd
liked
like
it.
to do
You
is
liked it.
I was on TV. I had to lie and make you look good somehow. But
Right.
I do want to say, as we bring this evening to a close, I want to thank Dr. Ray Guarendi, where his humor and his wisdom come together in very digestible but very profound spiritual truths that we need to make sure that we put into practice. So, Dr. Ray, I want to thank you for that. And to all of you watching, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Please make sure you continue to participate in the livingprolife.com conference, where we'll have other fantastic speakers and presenters and leaders of the pro-life movement. So for now, I want to say thank you once again to our special guest and to all watching as we ask for God's blessings upon all of us and the pro-life movement. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go forth and proclaim the good news by your lives. Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Ron.